So I guess for today's session, I'd really like to highlight two things, and that's an introduction to entrepreneurship in general, and some of my thoughts on what it takes to be an entrepreneur, ideally a successful entrepreneur, but as part of being an entrepreneur is you won't be always successful. And then the second part is an introduction to biodesign, both as kind of the program as it's done at Stanford. From a fellowship perspective, there, as I mentioned, they have a full-time fellowship. It's 10 months. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail. And I'm going to compare that to our unique program that we have going on here, which is what I would call almost like a part-time type of fellowship. I'll also get into, and this is just a bullet reminder here, to buy your biodesign textbook. Hopefully everyone has looked online. If you haven't, please jot that down right now or go to Amazon while I'm talking, buy it, or Kindle. And there is a second generation book, which I should have mentioned. If you bought the first book already, it's okay. This one has like a oyster on the front, and it's the latest version. But I should note that almost everything that's in the book, even though I think it's really important to have a hard copy, almost everything is on the website ebiodesign.org. So if you want to jot that down, please do. It's the letter, biodesign.org. And it's actually a really fantastic resource. For those of you that don't have the book already, there's a number of videos that are directly addressing the things that we're talking about today and every day. So you can actually follow along as we move through the biodesign process. You can actually click on videos and hear people much more interesting than I am who have done all these different lessons, the school of kind of hard knocks. They'll teach you what not to do or what to do in all these specific areas that we're going to go about. So definitely use that as a guide. And also I'll be assigning readings every week in the textbook to do. But if you want to dig deeper, I'd say go to ebiodesign.org. And if you don't have the book yet, please go through ebiodesign.org. I think it's 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. They all deal with observations, needs, and need statements, and that'll become more clear as we go through this. So the next thing we'll do, basically an outline for the class here, is I'll go over the course syllabus to give you an idea of the roadmap, the trajectory that we're on. We'll also go over this presentation that I put together called Creating Your Own Entrepreneurial Path. It's lessons I've learned the last 5 years, and lessons I wish that someone would have shared with me. So hopefully I'll provide 1 or 2 new insights that you can use for your career or whatever. Then I want to take a little break from the presentation, and I want us to have a discussion on last week. You remember I wanted to know what you found interesting from the Biodesign website, from searching around. And so, it's not a big deal, but I just want everyone to go around and share, hey, this is one of the most interesting things I learned. This is why. And it doesn't really matter what or why even. It's just to hear everyone's perspective on things, and you can get to know each other more too. And also I want you to share what the main reason is for you to commit to the program, because I hit on that earlier that this is a long program. It's not for credit. There's gonna be a lot of things coming up that I think are gonna be really special in terms of supporting you all as entrepreneurs, potentially with funding, with applying for business plan competitions, along with learning the process, which is free if you get what I'm saying. The part of the learning is free, but we want to do everything we can along with the graduate team to support you in that. So just know there's other things that are coming along, but it's going to be really important for you to have a kind of a firm commitment of why you're doing this. Then we'll take a quick break. We'll take that either before or after the discussion. Then we'll go into more of a biodesign and needs finding presentation. So basically a layout of kind of what the Stanford biodesign process is and what that's going to look like, and with a specific focus on how you kind of identify unmet needs and how you start looking at unmet needs if you want to pursue them or not as potential projects. Then we'll have a quick discussion, and then talk about assignments for next week. So are there any questions there? Raise your hand big if you have a question, because I can't see otherwise. But if there aren't any questions, then I guess I'll just get moving here to the course syllabus. Okay, so this is actually online. So if you go to the Blue Link website, this is already posted. And there will be some changes over the year on the syllabus as we go through this class for the first time. But, overall, this is kind of the nuts and bolts, if you will. So, we're in the first stage right now. We'll be looking at, for the next 4 weeks or so, we're going to be looking at needs findings. So we're going to talk about what type of clinical areas are we going to focus on, right? What are your areas that you are interested to focus on? We also have clinical areas such as radiology with Dr. Alex Norbash, who's the course lead, and also, I believe, orthopedics and some other branches of medicine where we're trying to gain more support so that you all can do more needs kind of validation. It's not a full-on clinical immersion. You're not going to be in the hospital for weeks, but we're hoping that it's going to be a mix of coming in with some of your ideas, but that are really problems in certain areas. Maybe it's cardiovascular medicine, whatever it may be. But there's going to be kind of this marriage between what your interests are and then where we have certain clinical faculty support that can guide us. So right now it's a little bit nebulous, but it will get more clear in the next week. So if you can just kind of trust me that these clinical areas are going to come together. And I'd say we're also very flexible, and we also want your input as well as how we should go about pursuing the different clinical needs. I guess what I don't want is for one person just to say, especially an engineer, because I'm one myself, say, hey, I have this great idea, and I know this is the best idea, and that's not what we want to do. We want somebody to say, like what Martin said, right? I had psoriasis. I experienced psoriasis. There's all these people around me that experience it. It's an unmet need. So long story short, that will probably encompass the first 4 weeks, I would say, of us as a class to get down to some of the kind of the top need statements, the top clinical areas that describe needs. And then I think we're going to try to organize our teams, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're going to organize these teams around these kind of areas of interest of these several need statements. But the main thing to keep in consideration is we need to have a diverse team, or it's not going to be effective. So there needs to be, a med student, a business student, and an engineer at least on each of the teams. So there's going to have to be some type of moving around that makes sense for everyone. But that to me, that's really important, that because these first 4 weeks in the needs finding, it'll help us get these need statements written well, which we'll get into what that means, and they're actually valid. It'll also continue to have you all have a better idea of what you want out of this program. And then also it will move into the team formation part of this. So I think we're looking at putting the teams together around the 3rd week, once we have better needs identified. So this is kind of how it'll go, and then by the end of this stage 1 for needs finding, hopefully we'll have the teams around at least a need or two that are true needs and that can be pursued further. And then that's where we'll go into stage 2, which is weeks 5 through 6, where you'll take these, let's say each team has 2 needs, okay, because that's 2 to 3 needs. I think we'd be in really good shape, because that means that you have a diversity of what needs to evaluate, right, and how to evaluate them not just on their own, but compared to others, what I call kind of a horse race, which need is best. That's when stage 2 comes in. We're going to be doing the needs screening, disease state fundamentals, so understanding what the physiological responses or the actual clinical pathophysiology or whatever it is, that's going to be absolutely critical to understanding the problem. So these are kind of the main buckets in need screening that you're going to learn how to assess. So how do you assess the disease state quickly? What are the other treatment options on the market, right? Are you just a me too, or are you completely hitting a blue sky project? Who are the stakeholders? Are they going to accept your product? Are they going to hate it, or at least accept your need? Do they, again, this part, I correct myself, should focus more on the needs itself, but you should at least know what types of treatments are being used in the space and how well they work or do not work. Then you're jumping into market analysis. So what's the compounded annual growth rate? How quickly does this market grow? Where are the threats? There's all types of market analysis that can be done, and we'll teach you the ones that are the quickest and the most important to evaluate things by. And then at the end of this is a deliverable. At the end of stage 2, there's something called needs filtering. And this is where you're going to put together a document that's going to evaluate, say, the 2 or 3 needs that each team has. So it'll look at all these things that I just mentioned on the needs screening. And you'll actually do a full quantitative analysis on how you come to an answer for something like this. So it's very much about the data, this process, which I think is really important. And there's no invention. There's no invention here. We don't know what the invention is going to be, and that's really important because sometimes knowing the invention will cloud your judgment on if you think it's a good invention, then maybe you think it's a good need. But how about that invention that seems crappy in the beginning, but the need is so good that you come up with a better invention? That actually happens a lot. So those are kind of the 2 main stages that we're going to go through the full process on for the first quarter here. Then into kind of the last part of the quarter, we're going to move into the invention stage. So this is where your team has, just 1 or 2 needs, or a handful of needs. Maybe all of them that you had in the needs screening, or maybe you crossed out 2 of them and you're only down to 1. Right? I'm just giving examples, but bottom line is you're going to be at the point where you're like, you know what? I think this is a good need statement. This is a good problem. It checks all the boxes for the market. And it's time to invent. So we will go through an ideation and brainstorming phase. We'll teach some processes, I would say, that come from IDEO, which is one of the top design firms in the world, and also from Stanford's design school. So there's some really unique ways of brainstorming. So we'll be going through that in the basically end part of the course for this quarter. And by the end, my hope is that there's a concept screening where that means you'll have at least several different concepts for each need. So you'll have maybe, say, 4, and I'll write this all out so it's more quantitative, but you would have maybe 4 different concepts for each need, and you would say, okay, this is, these are the pros and cons for this concept, etc., etc. There's a precise way to do it, but I think walking out by the end of the winter quarter, I think that would be amazing because you're like, hey, I have a really exciting problem that I'm working on. I think I have somewhat of an idea of something that could work. And then you get to kick off stage 4 after the quarter, which is where you jump more into the concept selection and you really learn a lot more about the IP. So that's the next one, is the concept selection. Could I just take a pause really quick? And if anyone, I know that was a lot to go through, and it's a lot of theory right now. It's not practical, but is there anyone that has any questions that I could speak to? I know that can't be that clear what I just said. No? Okay, I'll keep on going then. So after the winter quarter, we'll jump into a lot more focus on the intellectual property, and then it'll move into the actual implementation, the actual business that kind of will drive things forward. Now, it's really important to note that what you will get the most out of this class, this program, on is the first stages. Because what happens is when it gets to implementation, don't get me wrong, it's very important. If you don't have a viable business model, it's not going anywhere. But a lot of times you can hire people, hire consultants. You don't necessarily. You're definitely going to learn how to do this, and you're going to learn how to do this well. But I just want to point out that really the tool that you can take in your tool belt going forward, one of the main things is saying, no, I really kind of talked to doctors, I really understood, really talked to my teammates who are really smart and from different backgrounds, and we figured this out, we figured this problem out, and then we figured out this solution, right? So that's really important to highlight that. But it's not to say, the stage 4 that will start in the beginning of next quarter. Obviously, they're learning the regulatory basics. What's a 510K? What's a PMA? What's a combinational, drug device system? What is a biomaterial a drug? Is it, just basically so you understand the lingo. If you don't know some of the lingo, you'll learn, and you'll learn how, if it's a PMA, which is a pre-market approval, which means that it can take many, many, many years for a new medical device to get approved because there's no baseline device on the market, then it's a totally different business model than if you have something that's a 510K, which is like a Me Too. You can just claim equivalence to another device on the market. I've been involved with companies that do both, and one you may raise $2 million and one you may raise $20 million. So it completely changes the game. So by basically end of April, we'll be in the final concept selection. So this is where things are getting real, where you're saying, I found the need, I found the potential solution or the best potential solution at the time. So you will have, I should mention the importance of prototyping. We will make sure to have some prototyping space available and kind of some formal instruction on prototyping, and also those engineers. I think it's a good time for some of the engineers in the room that may be more versed on the different mechanical tools. They can also teach us too as a team. So basically right before the implementation stage, we're looking at, you kind of have a nice need to solution combo, and now you got to really figure out how to take it forward, if you want to take it forward. But it doesn't really matter if you want to take it forward or not at the end of this course. The whole point is that you learn how to de-risk. You learn how to de-risk a problem. You learn how to de-risk a solution. And here you're going to learn how to de-risk a business model. And so stage 5 will be about developing the strategy and product planning surrounding the company. So, intellectual property, however many patents you have or want to file for, or even if you're not filing for a bunch of patents, maybe you just file for one provisional patent for this course because you have a new idea. It doesn't matter. You need to look, now you see, okay, who's the competition? What are they doing? Is my product patentable? Is there freedom to operate? What kind of strategy, it's, in a sense, it's kind of making your war chest, right? Because those are your weapons, those are your patents. So we're going to have a really good attorney or two come in to tell you about how to do all these searches and hopefully even help us some more too. What's your R&D strategy? That is completely tied into how you raise money. If you don't understand what your milestones are for when you raise money as a company, then you're going to be way off and you're going to underfund yourself or overfund yourself. What's the clinical strategy? Are you going to do your clinical study in the U.S.? Are you going to do it in Mexico? Are you going to do it in India? Maybe you don't need to do a clinical study at all. And then regulatory strategy, we touched on that earlier with how the type of filing can drastically change what you're going after. Stage 6, we're talking numbers, we're talking financial strategy here. So I think these are really big things that as a student I didn't really get. The whole idea of reimbursement, that now, it doesn't matter if your product could save the world, it could save cancer, you name it, save your dog, but if it's not reimbursable, because it's such a, everything has to be reimbursed these days, no one will buy it. And there's many companies that have failed because they do cure serious issues and ailments, and they fail because they can't get a reimbursement code. So you're going to learn about, yes, I see a hand. I like to see that.
Can you talk a little bit about reimbursement? Does that mean by the insurance companies? Is that what you mean?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you're going to use that.
Oh, hey, yeah. So I was asking, reimbursement, is that in regard to the insurance companies that you're talking about? I'm not familiar with reimbursement.
Yeah. Would you mind repeating the question? There's some feedback. The mic.
Sure. It's in regard to reimbursement. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? Is that insurance related?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, it is insurance related. So I guess what I'm thinking is, if you put together all of your plan for some new type of venture, and you have, I'm looking at stage 5, you have your IP strategy in place. You have your patents filed. You have your R&D strategy. You have your clinical strategy, your regulatory strategy. Basically, it's a document that's forming your business plan. It's like saying, hey, this is what, if you're an investor and you pay me X, I can do all of these. But if you leave out reimbursement, that can completely take you out from a business. And a lot of investors are very careful about, like, for some devices, you have to apply to get a reimbursement code. So sometimes when your device is really revolutionary, you have to apply for, there's different codes. I won't go into detail now. But yeah, so it's the whole idea of know ahead, right? This whole process, the biodesign process, is about de-risking and about knowing what may happen, right? So you can see kind of, rather than thinking about reimbursement once you've already built your product and done your clinical studies, which does happen, you know from the beginning, okay, maybe this is going to be a huge challenge and maybe it's not. So yes, it does really relate to, in this case, to insurance.
And a follow-up to that is there a particular percentage that we're looking for as far as reimbursement versus out-of-pocket that a customer is willing to pay versus what the insurance would pay?
Yeah, so it just depends. So I'll give you an example. One of my companies, it's a dental implant company. We have an FDA-cleared dental implant. And reimbursement, all I had to do was literally cross it off because it's a self-pay market. So it's not an issue at all. One of the other projects I've been on, it was a pre-market approval, which means that's a long regulatory study, and then that transferred over to a long reimbursement process. And for that specific area in ophthalmology, it needed to be reimbursed 100%. So from my limited knowledge on a lot, by no means am I an expert on reimbursements, but I found that normally you need to have, especially if it's a product, you need to have a lot of the product actually reimbursed. But if it's a treatment, I don't know, are you referring more to a treatment, or do you have a specific application in mind?
No, nothing in mind. Just was unfamiliar with how the reimbursements worked.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, I think it's not more like on a case-by-case basis, but we'll teach you how to assess that. Thank you. So moving on, we're still in stage 6. We just talked about reimbursement. So then there's the marketing and stakeholder strategies. So for those of you who have not studied marketing, like I didn't really study marketing in grad school, we'll get a little bit into early adoption and how to drive that with little to no money. We'll also talk about sales and distribution strategies. So, are you selling? You're the company, right? And are you selling directly to a surgeon? Are you selling to the hospital directly? Are you hiring someone to sell to the surgeon? Are you hiring someone to sell to the hospital? Are you hiring a third party to sell to both of those? So it's just, there's all types of scenarios, and each one of those, it's really important to think through that you have a scalable business model. Because I can tell you from experience that if you're trying to raise a couple $100,000 from an investor that knows anything, that's going to be one of the first questions is when's your first sale? What are you going to be making? What's your sales strategy? Many people, you'd be surprised, don't even care, even if it's the coolest Kool-Aid for the gadget or even helping the patient. Sometimes it just comes down to money for some people. So having an idea, and I mean, they have to too. It has to be a viable business for it to ever help people. And so knowing the sales and distribution channels, we'll talk about that. And then what's your competitive advantage? So what's really that one thing that separates you from the competition? And knowing, are you that one new product that's screaming and sexy, or are you completely on the back seat and there's, you're the next stent. There's tons of stints out there. So knowing kind of what makes you competitive and how to get a buzz out there and an excitement on the market, that's really key to success. Lastly, for stage 7, we're looking at integrations. So this is dealing now with actually going to market. Many healthcare companies do not actually go to market. A lot of them get purchased before they ever launch a product. It's very common. They'll get purchased. They'll get a FDA approval. You hear it a lot with pharma drugs, and then Merck or Pfizer picks them up or whatever it is. But it doesn't matter because you still have to know what your strategy is if you don't sell, right? Because no one's gonna want to give you a good value for something if you're like, oh yeah, I just want to sell it to you, right? This is putting together your own plan of how you could take it to launch, even as a small company or small team. See, product launch, implementation strategy. We're talking about the operating plan and the financial model. So, how do you look at, a profit loss statement and a balance sheet, things like this that are just really, I don't think they're always taught enough unless you're a business student, but basic finances of running a company, business plan development. So, for those of you not familiar, there's an executive summary, which is basically a short business plan. It's normally 2 pages or 1 page, and it just kind of summarizes almost all these key things we're talking about right now. It's all on one sheet, so it's very concise. And then for business plans, they're kind of dinosaurs right now. I don't feel like a lot of people have the time to read business plans anymore. So oftentimes they're just like PowerPoint presentations that a lot of people give, although some firms do require. I don't mean to tell you not to do one, but it just depends on who you're working with. But doing a business plan is good because it does force you. Most importantly, it forces you and your team to be on the same page and to make it look like, to a certain extent, on paper at least, that you know what you're doing. Which sometimes you need that to convince yourself that what you're doing makes sense, truly. And then, the business plan, it ranges in size. It can be, typically it's 10, 20, 30 pages or so. But there's not going to be a requirement to write a whole business plan. It's going to be more important to put together a presentation at the end of the year, which will definitely be a main point of what we're doing here, so that you have something to share at this entrepreneur showcase. And also, if you're wanting to recruit other people to your team or to your project or to fund outside money, this is not, again, a requirement to start a company or anything like that. But, it's encouraged in the sense of, we want to support that if that's kind of the direction you want to go. But you will have all the resources, and you will have learned what it takes to get to that point. So maybe you have to go finish your PhD, or maybe you have to go do whatever. You now know, though, that you can kind of go through this whole process, and if you can do it once, you can do it twice, you can do it 10 times. So at the end, looking for funding sources, and then there's different aspects of licensing. If you've heard that term before, you can license or sell the rights to your patent to different companies or to other individuals. So these are all things that we'll discuss and you'll learn about. But really, I think the deliverable at the end will be a presentation. We'll go over all this, but it will be a presentation that you show kind of confidently that you've done diligence in kind of checking the box in IP strategy and R&D strategy, and just kind of going down the list to show that you've learned what kind of is the most risk, what's the least risk, and what it's like to really go through a whole kind of business creation in a sense. So I will take a pause, and hopefully I'll get one more question for someone.
Hello. I was wondering, what's the biggest difference between a business plan and an operating plan or financial model?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly. Normally, a business plan is more formal. It's gonna cover more. It's gonna be longer. Normally, a business model is more like we're selling A to B, or it's kind of I would say it's reduced and refined. I would also say that actually with the operating plan too. So I think the business model and the operating plan are kind of shorter, more concentrated versions of the overall business plan. Okay, good. Any other questions? Maybe one more person before we get going.
So my question kind of goes backwards towards the needs finding.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how we're going to go about that. Is it
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that will be answered in more detail in one of the lectures. So if you don't mind, I'll just go over that in I think it's the second lecture.
That's fine, thank you.
Sure. Right. If there's nothing else, I can go ahead and jump into the one of the presentations here. Are you guys awake? Or am I making you sleep? Like, where's everybody at? Like, yeah? Okay. All right. I need to see some enthusiasm, or I don't know. So, okay. Okay. So this is kind of my own rendition on entrepreneurship, and it's kind of personal. It's not exactly just biodesign. It's just what I've learned. I finished my PhD in 2011 from UCSD. I did biodesign at Stanford when I was 2010. So a lot of these are just kind of lessons that I wish I would have learned when I was at UCSD. I'm going to start out by this really uplifting quote by Elon Musk. Being an entrepreneur is like eating glass and staring into the abyss of death. And I put that as the first slide because oftentimes we look at people like Elon Musk, or you could name a bunch, and it's like we don't realize how difficult. I never realized how difficult being an entrepreneur really is. It's not for the faint of heart, and many times it is that intense. But I just think it's important for everyone to know that. And one of my mentors, who I'm going to introduce him later just by picture, I met with him for like an hour, and just to get his, it was actually the first time I met him. He's a very senior person in the medical device field, and pretty much the whole time he was trying to convince me not to be an entrepreneur, which I thought that was so surprising. But it's because you're putting out fires all the time, and I could say there's so many amazing things with it, and I will tell you that, and that's why I do it. But just be prepared. It can be very very taxing, and it's not that often discussed. So, on a more positive note, I think it's important to. It's kind of like baseball, in terms of chances with a successful startup or a successful entrepreneurship. So, you see frequencies on one axis, outcomes on the other. It's going to take a lot of strikeouts to hit a home run. And a lot of people don't ever hit a home run. They just get strikeouts, or maybe they get a base hit. It's very rare that you'll see when I say strikeout, I would define it as like a product that's been developed actually makes it to a patient or makes it into a company, and maybe the company is acquired, or there's some type of translation, right, from the clinic or invention to the patient benefiting. So it really is a long road, and I believe in Silicon Valley, there's a statistic that it's something like only one out of 10 companies are funded by venture capitalists. And if you're not familiar with venture capitalists, they're basically investors that have big pockets. So they have a lot of money to throw around, a lot more than just a smaller investor. And so that's only 1 out of 10 at those firms. So you have to make it to get into those firms. So it's such a rigorous process that you can mitigate this. You can have less strikeouts, and I'll tell you more reasons why I think you can have less strikeouts. And a big one is being in a program like what you guys are doing and building a team and a network. But I gotta say, swing for the fences. I'm overly optimistic that there's tools, there's processes, there's mindsets, there's mindful meditation practices that allow for us to keep our head in the game and to really kind of make our dreams happen, if you will, by taking risk. So this is probably one of my favorite phrases, and this will be one of the main phrases of the course. We will have a number of them, but this will be one, and I want you to all keep this in your head. So fail fast, fail often. So what does that mean? I mean, failing's bad, right? Well, not really, because as I said on Tuesday, if you don't ski hard enough and you don't fall, then you're not really maybe learning. It's the same kind of thing. So I think I always had this in my head where I thought, I have to be perfect. I get good grades, I get this, I get that. But you know what? It doesn't really matter, because you learn when you're uncomfortable, and you learn when you get inspired. And I think it's a really important part. Even in this class, you guys are starting to ask questions. I really appreciate that. That's taking a small little risk. And I want this to be a safe environment where we aren't afraid to fail. And your mistakes aren't you, right? If you make a mistake, that's just something you tried. You brush it off. But, easier said than done. So even when we're presenting and you're like, oh, I don't know, like I've never, I'm a medical student. I've never presented about a business model. Or, you're an engineer and you never talked about, some type of medical features. You know what? That's okay. And if you fail, you've really actually learned something. So it's not even really failing. So this is my failure resume. I told you this was going to be personal. So I had all these things going on. I had a speech impediment. I didn't get into top colleges. I applied for, I failed my MCAT, GRE twice, quit first job out of college, didn't get into any PhD programs. But I finally got into one, failed my PhD Senate exam at UCSD in the bioengineering department, and suffered from anxiety and depression. Not a good way to be introduced publicly, at other places. But you know what? It just shows everyone has their failures, and we don't always talk about them. But I think there's actually a lot of strength in them. So if you look at my success resume, okay, I've done various degrees, and I've spun out various companies, and I've co-founded other companies and taught and had some success. But the whole point is that, like, if I didn't have all of those other failures or difficulties or challenges, then they wouldn't have put me in this position to look successful, which success is really a state of mind, not a destination. So I just really want to hammer that home. Like, don't be afraid to fail or to ask stupid questions or whatever. This is a good place for that. All right, so getting off my little soapbox there. So now we're going to, let me see, yeah. We had a question earlier about kind of more meat on the identification of needs and how to kind of do needs finding. And so this will kind of go over this, kind of gloss over it, and then the next quick talk I'll give after the break, we'll go over it a little deeper. So this is going to probably annoy you guys, but this really is the mantra of Stanford Biodesign. It's really identify, invent, implement. can't tell you how often you're going to say, but I have this idea that I think that this should be the case. You already heard me earlier say that I had an idea basically for something, as opposed to like, this is a problem that we're going after that now warrants a solution. So it's really important to approach the process with kind of a blank slate. So whatever preconceived notions you have of something, you basically want to have a beginner's mind, child's mind, to looking at the problems. And often it does take a completely different perspective or openness to identify a good problem or to work to get a good need statement. But these are the main processes here that also we went over on the syllabus. Top 10 startup mistakes. This is right in line with what we're talking about. This is out of, I think, yes, this startup kind of journal here, but it says that the number one problem of a startup is building something nobody wants. Now, that's one of the worst things ever, right? You spend 5 years building something, and it turns out your client doesn't even care about it. So that's the last thing we want to do, and by following these principles, you won't have that problem. I'm just going to focus on that one as the number one problem, because I can't tell you how many startups that I've heard of, or they want me to even try to consult with them, and they don't have a client. They don't have any clue that what they're doing is needed. So this is the book, and this is actually the updated book with the clam or oyster or whatever there, just so you have it as a reference. But if you did buy the older book, it's okay, because they're very similar. Okay, I think we covered that. I'm not going to go into that in detail. So what I wanted to do now, just briefly, is I wanted to give you all an idea of what my fellowship was like at Stanford. And it's not because I think Stanford is better. It's not because I think Stanford is whatever. It's only because this is the program that I knew, and this is what I learned, kind of where I was coming in and where I left going out on my merry way. So hopefully you'll appreciate this. So this was a fellowship program. It was a full-time fellowship program, 10 months. This was the team that I was on, and you can see a diverse, rowdy group. I come in I was in the 4th year of my PhD, which I don't recommend putting a PhD program on hold like that, but I came in and had the honor to work with these guys. And what I'm getting at is, the most that I probably learned out of the whole program, it wasn't for the instructor, it wasn't from the classes, it was from my teammates. So I really hope that that's the same thing for you all, that you really get to know each other and you can really lean on each other. And yeah, like I said, I really learned the most from them, and we're still all really good friends. So for that program, we had the luxury of doing a clinical immersion, which we're trying to get for next year, guys. Basically, we had 4, 5, 6 weeks, I think, in the hospital to completely see, as I mentioned, with fresh eyes and ask naive questions. So we started from scratch, from just observations, which I'll get into, 2 needs, and then we developed this list of actually over 300 needs and kind of documented them. So obviously we can't do that because of the time constraint and the challenges of getting in the hospital. But what I'm hoping is that we can get some good needs together as soon as possible, and then we can work with different doctors, and you can still have some of an experience of this immersion. And we can talk about that more later. But basically, this is kind of the process. I just realized that was a picture of me. Okay. What it really was is drinking through the fire hose, though. So it's this element of, look, you may not really know this at all. None of us knew. We were in ophthalmology. That was our clinical area. None of us knew ophthalmology. I mean, Vic was a surgeon, but I didn't know anything about the eye. And so it's the idea of you're uncomfortable, but then you see it from a different, completely radical outlook. So, just for this course, please just be as open as possible and take it all in. So what we did is we went from this large amount of needs to about 16. So this is where we focused them down and whittled them down. And when I'm in class next week, I'm going to teach you how you go from a list of needs to how do you know you have this need, but how do you know which ones makes priority? We'll get all into that. What we focused on was actually dry eye. So I thought dry eye was not a big issue at all. Like someone gets a little piece of dirt in their eye or whatever, like why is this really a problem? Well, it turns out, unfortunately, for a lot of people, it just can be so harmful to them in terms of it's debilitating is the word that I was thinking of in the most severe case. Okay. So we ended up focusing on dry eye, both in a severe case and a mild case as a team. So now we're in the invention stage. So we identified a problem right around dry eye. Now we're in the invention stage. So we were just listening to like lots of music and getting hopped up on caffeine, and then brainstorming. So this is where we'll teach you the kind of process of the actual some method to the madness on the brainstorming. And then this is where we move from, okay, we generated a couple good concepts for these needs. Now we're going to actually compare the concepts with each other. So this is where it becomes kind of a bit of a horse race, where you have each need that has a couple different concepts, and then which is the best kind of lead need, if that makes sense. So again, this is just more of as a conceptual framework for you to see. We ended up coming up with 2 different innovations for the class. So both of them were to treat dry eye, as I mentioned, which is a huge unmet need. The first is more of a contact lens that's more hydrophilic, so it keeps the moisture in for the eye. And the other is actually a stimulator that's actually an implant to treat dry eye disease. At least that was the form factor then, is it was an implant because it was that serious to treat people. But this is to give you an idea of, hopefully by the end of the year, whatever clinical area and clinical invention you work on, you're going to have something like this where it's at least a potential option of something that could go forward that's been de-risked. So this is kind of where we were at that was at the 10-month level, and we're full-time, so it's not fair to compare. I'm just saying that's kind of where we were at. And something else that's really important to understand is that this is also tied into what I'm learning and also the programs that come out, is it's really important to understand the difference between a company and a product. So on the right, you have a large company, which is multiple products and large markets. And on the left, you have more of a product, which is like your tools, your instruments. It can be smaller types of products. So just know, when there's a certain time where you'll realize in your business model, do I need to blow this out and make this a huge company and sell the multiple products, multiple markets or whatnot? Or am I okay to just say, hey, this is a really good invention. I want to license it or sell it to this company, and I'm happy because it's in the clinic or something like that. So just keep that in mind, because that will make a huge difference. And also what your vision is, if you really want to run something and really grow the company, or if you just want to pass it along. So I wish I would have known that, I think, earlier in the process. Also in starting companies in the last couple of years. Just another couple quick things of advice before we break. I really like this saying, think big, start small. I think sometimes when you're tackling a really big clinical problem that's really difficult, it's easy to get overwhelmed, or it's easy to try to just running in all directions. But always think about what you can do that's really small, just to move that stone a little bit further up the hill. And this is also a saying by one of my mentors, Thomas Fogarty, who invented the Fogarty catheter, and he mentioned, I think he invented over 50 different medical patents. So he knows a little something about how to innovate and start small. And then this is for all of us, I think, is think through what role you want to take in the process, right? We're all at aspects in our career where we're thinking next steps, right? And you probably don't want to be a jack of all trades. You'd like to have some kind of specific focus area. And what is that? Like, you may know from a technical standpoint, I want to be an electrical engineer, whatever it is. But maybe it's looking into like learning a little bit more about, okay, what does a chief scientific officer look like? How does that differ with a chief business development officer or the chairman of the company? So it's all things like that are really important to learn about, so you can kind of focus in your career on where you want to head. This is a good slide. I won't read it. Just I think it's important to know the intersection of where there's actually an issue, what really excites you, and what you're good at. And also to start with why. So most people start with the what. You say, I do this, I make this, or the how, I go to school, I getting a degree, I work a job. But it's very few people actually take the time to reflect and ask about what their cause is and what are you excited enough to get you to commit to something for a couple years if it's a startup that you may fail at and you may make no money at and have to fire people on and all this kind of stuff. But that's like, I'm being extreme, but just in general, if you want to go out and get a engineering job, is that really working for that company? Is that really part of your core cause? So I think this class will also ask us to kind of evaluate, why. Last couple slides. So this is how I've learned how to fail fast. Like, you can fail very quickly doing any of these, and I've done a lot of these. Start with a good idea, not a problem. Do it on your own, not with a team. No one can do entrepreneurship without a team. That's just how it goes. Overcompromise, lie instead of sharing the risk. Get feedback from your peers, not customers. So don't just trust your best friend. Like, if I have an idea or a problem and I ask enough people and nobody says that's a bad idea, then I know I need to get other feedback. I need to get harsher criticism. How to stay on the course, find a problem that matters, that you love. Protect your patents early. If you have a really good idea, be careful about who you're presenting to, who you're talking to. Within this course, it's okay. We're gonna talk about that, but really be careful. Learning the biodesign process. I can't tell you how much it's been a roadmap for my own growth. Prototype. Build a prototype. If you have an idea, build something as soon as possible and put it in the customer's hands. It's kind of Steve LINC style entrepreneurship. And take action and stay focused on the problem. And I mentioned that I had a mentor that's near and dear to my heart. His name is Fred Khosravi. I have to thank him because he actually funded my time at Stanford, and he was an amazing mentor and just reminds me of the importance of giving back, and I believe I'm giving back in the form of this course as well. Here are just a couple other books. Again, the slides will be up here. These are all books that have had a huge impact on me. In particular, I would say Getting to Yes, because it's a book on negotiation, which you're not really taught negotiation in most classes, and that's one of the most important skill sets of an entrepreneur. So hopefully we'll get into some negotiation tactics in this class. And then the other book is mindfulness. So mindful leadership, being mindful, being in the present moment of one's activities, is actually really good for stress reduction, and it's a very powerful tool. Tim Ferriss, many other successful entrepreneurs meditate, 20 minutes a day or whatever, and I believe it's an amazing way to stay focused and stay cool when stuff hits the fan. And I'll leave you with this quote, which is one of my favorites. It says, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail." So that's all that I have. And I think why don't we go ahead, if there's any other questions about the presentation, we can take them on after the break. So if everyone wants to come back, let's say 7:10, and so in 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion, and then we'll go over the next presentation and your questions. So, thanks.